What attracted you to this litigation, and why are you still with it?
Well, I may not have enough sense to quit, but the real truth in this is that whether we like it or not, this is the fundamental freedom that is at issue. The First Amendment to the United States says that anybody, not just, quote, journalists, have a right to freely express themselves, but every citizen in the United States has a right to freely express themselves. And if you're going to come out and you're going to tax the freedom of expression on any citizen, no matter how a horrible criminal he is, or what a terribly reprehensible person they are, or how nonsensical or stupid, or how aggressive or angry their writings be, then you're infringing on what I consider the fundamental freedom of this United States. I watched two journalists in the 1960s overthrow a president by getting to the truth and not being limited by the government. Maybe it was the 70s. How do I know? But the bottom line is they got it done because they actively pursued an issue that the government wanted to quash. This is not that important, except that if we don't draw the line in the sand on freedom of expression, if we don't stop the government from telling us what we can say, when we can say it, or tax that in any manner, then we're going to allow the government to control your news media. Now, you don't want that to happen, and I don't want that to happen. There's a box here that says freedom of speech. I want it to mean something. And so, yes, I will continue with this litigation, and no, I haven't been paid a dime, and I haven't asked for a dime. This woman doesn't have the funds to hire a lawyer. She has to settle for me. She's going to settle for me for free. I'm not going to take money for the case. That's not what this is about. This is about the state jumping on somebody who can't fund their defense, and either we rally around that and we take the case as lawyers, pro bono, and do the job that we think ought to be done to protect the Constitution, or we need to get out of the profession. Everything we do in law does not have to pay. Boy, somebody's not going to like that.
Let me ask you briefly about what you just said. I think a lot of people may take issue with the notion that what Woodward and Bernstein did is somehow equivalent to what Danny Rowling has to say about why he became a serial murderer. What would your response to that be?
Still speech. Fundamentally, what Woodward and Bernstein did was they spoke. They were allowed to speak, and they spoke in opposition to the government. Granted, they did something far more significant and far more wonderful. But Danny Rowling's ability to tell his story and to say it in the United States must be preserved. Those at the edges of society must have their voice. If we don't give the people at the edges of society the voice, we lose the voice in the middle of society. And so that would be my response to that. We've got to stop the government's incursion on our First Amendment rights.
With that in mind, let me ask you my final question, and that is, can you analyze the state's case in this? What do you make of their case?
At this stage, I'm not sure I understand their case. Their case seems to be that my client can't talk because she happens to have a relationship, or can't publish or can't profit from the publication because she has a relationship with Danny Rowling. I don't consider that a ground for which we take away the First Amendment freedom of speech. And see, what is missed here is it is not just money that's at issue. It is that this taxes speech. This says, the government says, you got to pay us if you make this statement. That's to place a disincentive on making the statement. And I think a careful reading of the case Simon and Schuster will teach what Justice O'Connor believes was that this was a fundamental disincentive to the point that in Simon and Schuster, this stopped speech from occurring, or could stop speech from occurring, and as such, it wouldn't be allowed. Now, I don't agree with all of Simon and Schuster, but the bottom line is this taxing, this taking by the government. Remember, this is not you suing me because I called you a bad name. This is the government saying, we don't like this profit. The profits from speech, which means they don't like the speech. Ask yourself, in analyzing the questions asked by George Washington today, how much of that went to money, and how much went to the content of what was said? If you listen to his examination, 2/3 of his examination was based on the content, not the money, but the content of the statement.
Lloyd Vipperman, thank you very much for stopping to visit.